Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you this collection called Harvest Bloom. We'll be creating this 18-inch by 18-inch pillow and doing the thread sketching with hand-dyed thread from Valdani. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use wool thread in your sewing machine and how to create this really terrific design. So let's get stitching. To start the construction of our pillow top for this log cabin, which is a modern log cabin, we will start in the center by using fabric F. This is a 7.5 by 7.5 inch square. We will then attach with right sides together your first log, which is E1. You will do right sides together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and press. You will follow with E2, 1/4 inch seam allowance, right sides together, and press. And you will work around your log cabin, subsequently sewing D3, D4, then C5 and C6, B7, and B8, and you'll finish with A2 and A1. Once you have your pillow top completed, make sure you've pressed it nicely, because now we will start to get ready to do our tracing for the thread sketching. Now it's time to trace our design. I'm using a very inexpensive light box that I got off of Amazon. I can put the link in the comments below for you. I believe it was around $12. I've placed my design A1 over the top of that. And this is the design that I used in my sample for the quilt pattern. We'll now place our log cabin pillow top over the top of both of these so that we can see the design through the center block. And that's where we're going to be tracing the design onto. I like to use friction erase pins because they are heat erasable. That's why it's important that you have your pillow top pressed how you'd like it to be, so that you don't have to risk losing any of your design lines after you started tracing, because you need to press something. So it's always best to have it all pressed out nice. Just holding with your hand, you could tape it down with some painter's tape if you wanted. Start tracing the lines. Very easy to do, and it's pretty quick actually. Sometimes I'll go over the line a couple of times, but remember, it doesn't need to be exact. We just want a representation of the design, because there will also be some artisan quality to it once you start sketching with the sewing machine with the thread. You'll notice that there are some dots up in the open space above the flowers, and in that area we'll be doing some French knots, and that's just to keep the pillow top attached and centered on the quilt pattern or quilt batting, so it doesn't shift around a lot, and it just adds some extra interest and some texture. I really like that accent. So once we have this all traced out, you'll want to layer it with your backing fabric and your batting fabric, and pin with some safety pins so that it doesn't shift around and everything will stay flat and you won't get any puckers once we start doing the thread sketching. So now let's move over to the sewing machine. Here I'm showing you what the finished design looks like, but I wanted to show you this wool thread that we're going to be using in this design. These wool threads are hand dyed and they're produced by a company called Valdani Threads. This is Australian virgin wool on the spool. I'm using 8 weight, and yes, you can put this through your sewing machine. I like to use a top stitch needle from Schmetz, and the size that you want is a 100 by 16. I will also be doing some pencil quilting with a 35 weight 3-ply hand-dyed thread from Valdani, and the shade on this quilting thread is 0519. The thread colors for the wool are 0575, 0522, 0244, and H205. This is their 8 weight that I'm using here, but they also are coming out with a 15 weight wool thread on the spool. So be looking for that. I have stitched with a couple of samples on this, and it is lovely. So let's get stitching. Let's talk about the setup on your machine for doing thread sketching. So because we are using wool thread, it has a little denser quality to it. So I did loosen my tension on my top thread, just a skosh, not a whole lot. With a bobbin thread, I just used a normal thread weight. I wouldn't use anything as light as a 50 weight, but certainly a 40 or a 35 weight bobbin thread would be fine. Use a color that closely matches your top thread. I'm also using the foot 9. This is a free motion foot. Sewing on a Bernina, that's the number for this foot. And I dropped my feed dogs. For the needle, I'm using a Schmetz top stitch needle, and this is a 100 by 16. I like to take the needle and pre-thread it from front to back before I insert it into the machine. I find it easier to thread, especially with this wool. It is a little bit denser and harder to get through that needle eye. Once you have your machine all set up, you'll want to do a needle down and a needle up to bring your bobbin thread to the front of your work so that you can keep track of those threads. Keeps the back of your work tidier. And then once you're done stitching out your design or part of the way through, you can knot the threads and bury them to get them out of the way. And it just makes it easier. Once you start doing your stitching, my one thing I want you to know is go slow. Sometimes did this design. It's not the fault of the thread. It's just that it's wool and we're putting it through a sewing machine. This wool that's on the spool from Valdani is an 8 weight, but it also will be coming in a 15 weight that you can use. And I've had the opportunity to use both, and they both work beautifully. But all of the tips that I've given to you about working with the wool apply for both weights. So definitely give it a try if you have it available to you. It gives the stitching a really neat quality because it has a little bit of a fuzziness to it, kind of blurs the lines a little bit, and I really like it. As you watch this video, you'll see the path that I have taken in stitching out all these lines. And don't be afraid if you get off of a line. We're not looking for perfection here. You need to make it your own, give it an artisan quality. I certainly wasn't on the lines all the time while I was stitching, that's for sure. The part that I really liked was when I was able to start working and combining some of the colors. And you'll see that when I'm stitching these flowers, that I start to add some pink and with the orange and some tan into the centers of these flowers. And they really come to life and give it some texture and dimension. And I just love this. It is so much fun to do, and I can't wait to do more of it. I'm really hoping that you'll leave some comments below and tell me what you think. Did you try it? Even if you don't have using our 35 weight 3-ply variegated thread from Valdani, I'm using shade 0519 here, both in my top thread and in my bottom thread. That way we don't have to risk seeing the bobbin coming up through the front. If you just match the front and the back, you're better off that way. And I'm using a standard needle for my sewing machine from Schmetz, my free motion foot, and I'm just doing some pencil line quilting. I wanted to keep the quilting really simple so that that center design would really stand out. And I'm doing each of the logs individually with about 1/4 of an inch spacing between. And I'm really happy with the results of this. But if you're a quilter that is just amazing with your free motion quilting, you could certainly get very decorative here, and there's lots of opportunities for that for sure. Once we get this all quilted, then we'll square up our pillow top and get it binded. To square up your pillow top, you can use a square ruler if you'd like. I personally like to use just a regular quilting ruler. The one thing that I do is leave 1/4 of an inch seam allowance so that I can use a chunkier binding, because I like a 2.5 inch binding on my quilts and my pillows. It gives me the opportunity to do decorative stitches on my binding, which I really like and I do on most of my quilts. So make sure your pillow top is square and trim to 18.5 inches square. After we've squared up the pillow top, we will be attaching the binding and the backing pocket so that we can insert a pillow. Now it's time to create your back pocket. You'll use your fabric F that is 18.5 by 30 and 18.5 by 20. You'll want to fold these both in half and press. I went ahead and top stitched with coordinating thread and added my signature label before clipping it to the back of our pillow. You'll want to align it so that they do overlap each other, and use clips. We will attach our binding at the same time as the pocket. I like to attach the binding to the back of the quilt so that I can do a decorative stitch on the front of the quilt and stitch down the binding at the same time. You can see the completed project here. I just did some running stitches with some hand-dyed pearl cotton for a decorative touch to the seam binding. And it just turned out beautiful. I couldn't be more happy. So let me know what you think in the comments below of this project. It was so fun to do, and it really came to life with these beautiful threads from Valdani Threads. Until next time, happy stitching.